Welcome everybody, kia ora koutou. Welcome to today's webinar, which is all about object valuations. Today we're going to look at a variety of things around valuations. We'll look at the fields that are available and how they work. We'll look at some settings that are available that supervisors can set up. We'll look at reporting on valuations, restricting access or providing access to valuation data, updating valuation data in bulk, so across many records. And lastly, we'll look at how valuations and activities work together. You can update valuation information for objects for insurance and internal accounting purposes in the object valuation window. So it's got a table here for recording information, and I'm just going to look up a particular record. This glass cocktail shaker. So there's some mandatory fields that you have to fill out for valuations, and those are the type, the method or basis, the actual value, and the date. So you can record information about parts of records or the whole object. If you do record information for individual parts, you should also record a valuation for the whole object. And that's because the whole object value is used when you run a report on latest insurance values. And the whole object value is also used when calculating the opening and closing valuations. So let's look at some of the valuation fields that we have here. First off, we've got the type, and this is used to identify the nature of the valuation that's in the associated value field. The terms that we have in here are insurance. Now, insurance often reflects the replacement cost of the object. We have internal, and this often reflects the asset value of the object. And we also have both internal and insurance. And I'm just going to click on this option here to show IDs so that we can see the system IDs for these terms. So this becomes important if you're using XML Import to update valuations in bulk. It's handy to use the system ID, and I'll show you that soon. For internal, it's INT. For insurance, it's INS. And for both, it's BTH. Then we have this method field, and we have a few terms in here. We have actual value, and this is used where a valuation has been made with a high degree of authority, certainty, and precision. And this is usually used when an expert valuer has assessed the item. We have estimated value, and that's for valuations with less accuracy. These valuations are often provided by in-house specialists in this type of item. And lastly, we have estimated mean value, and it's the least accurate of these three valuation methods. It is often used for low-value items and large sets of common items. If you choose estimated mean value, you must enter a valuation category in the valuation field instead of just a figure. So in this case, we have got estimated mean value selected. So let's take a look at those valuation categories. So if I had chosen estimated value or actual value there, I could just enter a figure here. But let's look at this example with estimated mean value and what these valuation categories are. We have 4 categories here. You can create your own, but in this example, we have category A, $500, category B, $5,500, category C of $10,000, and category NCV, which is no commercial value and is $0. So let's open up one of these terms, category A, and just take a closer look at that. So category A is the name and the value from in 2 fields. We've got the value from $0 to $1,000. That's its category, and we're going to evaluate it in the middle as $500. So this is when you have less accuracy in your estimation of its value. Let's look at category B. Click this Go to highlighted term button. So category B has a value from $1,001 to $10,000, and we're evaluating it somewhere in the middle at $5,500. Category C, is from $10,000. It doesn't have anything in the to field. It doesn't have an upper limit. We're going to evaluate that as $10,000. And the last one, no commercial value, is just evaluate that as $0. So that's when you're using the estimated mean value method. When you have less accuracy, you can create these broad categories to value your objects. So the date field is pretty self-explanatory. In the reason field, this is why you're doing the valuation. So that could be a loan, it could be for an exhibition. In the demo system, we have these examples of that it's considered for deaccession, it's part of an inventory, or it's its market value. So we've got inventory selected as the reason, and then lastly, who did the valuation. So again, those mandatory fields that if you don't enter data into them, you can't save the record, are type, method/basis, value, and date. The reason, the person, the notes are optional, and so is the part field. So latest valuations. You can calculate the latest insurance value and the latest internal value for the whole object. So this is not for parts. So these are automatically chosen from up here. So let's say I change the category of this to $5,500. I can click this recalculate button and it will show the latest value there. So that's the object valuation window with its fields and the values shown there. I'll now show you some settings that you can apply for valuation. So you need to have supervisor access to be able to access this section. You go to Tools, System Maintenance, and then we go to Customized Configuration. So in the Customized Configuration window, we have a tab here for valuation. And I'll go through these options here. So this first one, if no internal value is entered, use the insurance value to calculate the current internal value and vice versa. So what that basically means is some objects have an internal value, but not an insurance value or vice versa. This setting allows the system to calculate the latest internal value or the latest insurance value based on any of the values that are available. The second option here, to default to 0 if no valuation is entered. If you select that, it will give a $0 if no valuation data is entered. If you leave this unchecked and you generate a report on the values of objects, the field will just show as blank in the report. But if you tick this, it will show with a $sign and 0. This next one is quite long. Number of days that an estimated or actual value has precedence over an estimated mean value when calculating the latest valuation. So you can enter a number in here, and that will be basically the number of days that an old valuation can be used when calculating the latest valuation. So by default, whatever value is most recent will be used unless you override it here. And the number of days is counted from the most recent valuation for the object, not from today or not from the current date when you enter something in here. So you could put 365, and that would be 1 year that that value could be calculated. In the valuation period dates here, we have opening and closing. You can construct reports that show the value at particular dates and compare the change in value between those two dates of particular objects. So this is quite useful for reporting on valuation changes in a financial year. So when you're creating a report, the fields that are affected by these dates are the opening valuation field, the closing valuation field, and the value increase field. And I'll show you that in a moment. So in the opening field, enter the earliest date for your time frame. So for example, the beginning of the financial year. So I'm going to enter the 1st of April 2016. And I've got a particular object that I'm going to show you for this. And in the closing field, enter the latest date for your time frame. So the end of the financial year. So I'll enter the 31st of March 2017. And now that I've set that up, I'll show you how to report on that, and I'll show you another type of report that you can do on valuations. I'm going to open up a particular object, which is a fan bars. And if we look at the valuation window for that object, we can see it's got some data in there, and it's got some data within that time frame that I specified earlier. I'm just using this as a particular example to show you how we can see the change in value over the financial year for a particular object. Now that I have that object open, I can run a report on it. I will create a new template, and when I select my fields, I'll choose, let's say, the accession number, the name and title, plus I will choose, I'm going to search for opening. So let's do this opening insurance value, the value only, and I'll double click on that. I'll choose the closing insurance valuation, and I will also choose this insurance value increase field. So now I'll say yes to those fields, and I can run my report. So we're just doing this on one record. We can see that the opening value was 100, the closing value was 115, and the value increase was $15. So that's reporting on the financial year. I'll also show you how we can run a report and look at the valuation totals for a group of records. It could be any group of records. I'm going to look for all of our bases. And now that I've got that list open, I can go to report. I'll create a new report template. In order to show the valuation total, we need to make sure that we're using the listing report and that we choose this field across the page option. Then when I go to select my fields, I'm going to choose the accession number, the name and title, and then I'm also going to choose insurance valuation latest. So let's find that in this list. There it is. I can double click on that to move it to the display fields list. And then I'm going to select that field and click on this cog button, detail. That brings up some more options here. I'm going to choose total, and that's all I need to do here. So what that's going to do is provide a total for all of those objects that I chose for my report. So now I can click on OK, and I can run my report, and let's see what that looks like. So here we have all of those objects and their latest insurance valuation, and then also the total there. So let's look at how access can be provided to valuation data, or we can prevent access to valuation data. So what I need to do is go into Tools, System Maintenance, Security Tool, and I'm going to click on Data File because I want to look at this from the perspective of the object file. So I'm going to look up Object. And in this list, we can see that the groups that have access to the object file are listed here, and whether they can create, delete, view, and modify. And then we have some field level exceptions. So we can see that this group, the social history catalogue group, does not have access to view or modify these different valuation fields here. So that's how we can specify whether a particular group can access certain data. And it could be other types of fields in here, but we're just looking at valuation today. Another way that we can do this, if your institution has a lot of users or quite complicated security permissions, it might be easier to create groups with access to certain parts of the system and then add users to multiple groups. For example, you could create security groups to reflect core cataloging, location transactions, valuation information, as I'll show you in a moment. It could be acquisition information. It could be conservation and treatment. So let's look at how we can set this up for valuation information. For each user in your system, you can assign a group, such as the public group, that determines all of the common rights, and then assign a combination of groups to cover additional data. So let's look at this for valuation. So I'm in the security tool and I'll click groups, and I'm going to create a new group called valuation information. I'm going to add a little bit of information to the notes about this group. So this group has access to the valuation window and all associated fields in the object file. So I know what this group is about. In this subordinate group section, I'm going to add the public group so that this new group inherits all of those common rights. So I choose public and click OK. So if I click on View Allowed Processes, this new valuation information group is going to get all of those common rights that are available to the public group. But now I actually want to allow some more processes. So I'm going to click on that, and there's a couple of processes that I'm going to add here. One is Menu, Tools, Bulk Valuation Update. So let's find that. We've got Menu, Tools, Bulk Valuation Update. So we're going to allow this group to be able to access that tool. And the other one is Windows Management, Insurance Activity Values. So I'll select both of those. And now when I click on View Allowed Processes, we can see that Menu, Tools, Bulk Valuation Update and Window Management Insurance Activity Values are available to this group, in addition to all of the ones that are available to the public group. And from there, you can click into the Users field and add particular users to this group. So that's setting up security, so allowing people or not allowing them to access valuation data, which can be quite sensitive. Now let's look at how you can update valuation data in bulk. So not just going to the object valuation window and changing it for one record, but changing it for many records. So there's two ways to do this. If the valuation of the objects is changing by a set percentage or value, or if they all have the same value, the best tool to use is Bulk Valuation Update. If you have many valuations that are different amounts for each object, that's when it's best to use XML Import. So let's look at Bulk Valuation Update first. We go to Tools, Bulk Valuation Update. So in this first table, I could enter the objects one by one, or I could enter a saved list, which is what I'm going to do here. I'll click into the list field, click this options button, which will open up portfolio. And I'm going to choose this list of Fumpston prints. We've got 11 prints in this list. And so the next thing I can do is set whether they're all increasing by a certain percentage, decreasing by a certain percentage, if there's a specific value increase, if like they're all increasing by $100 or decreasing by a certain amount. You can also set them all to a specific value. So I'm going to choose percentage increase and enter 10 in this field. So they're all increasing by 10%, these 11 prints. So for type, I'll choose insurance. For method, I'll choose estimated value. For date, I'll enter T, and that will put in today's date. The reason, let's say market value, and the valuer I'm going to say is Bill Vernon. And then I can run my bulk valuation update by clicking the OK button. So let's take a look at the other option that we have, which is XML Import. XML Import has quite a few steps to the process, and I won't go into detail on that today because we already have a few videos on that process. But I will show you the basic steps to use XML Import to update valuation data. So there's three main steps for XML Import: preparing your data, setting up the configuration, and running the import. So let's start with the first stage, which is preparing your data. You will have a folder where your Vernon is located, and that is called WinCol. In my case, it's called wincol.dmo for the demo system, but yours would be called WinCol. You go into the WinCol folder, and there's a folder called Toolkit. We go into there, And down the bottom, we have this XML Import.xlsm file. This is the file that we want, but I'm not going to open it. I'm going to copy it because I want to keep this template here for other people to use. So I'll right click on it and choose copy. And then I need to paste it somewhere and rename it. So for me, I'm going to choose my C temp folder. This is where I would paste it and rename it, but I've got one that I prepared earlier. So I'm just going to open that one. On the XML import spreadsheet, we have these two tabs. I'm going to go to the data tab, and I've already entered my data here. So I've got the ID number of the records that I want to update, the system ID, and I've got the value. So what you'll notice is that I don't have any of those other fields, like the method or the type or the date, but as we know, they're mandatory. So I've actually configured those in the XML configuration, and I'll show you that in a moment. And the reason that I've done that is because they're all the same data for each of them. They've all got the same valuer, all got the same valuation date, the same method and the same type. So rather than repeat that information for all of the rows in here, I've just done it in the configuration. So I'll show you that. But first, I go to my control tab. I've specified where I want the XML file to be saved, and I click generate. And now I can go into Vernon, go to Tools, XML Import Configuration. And this is where I would set up my configuration, but again, I've already prepared one earlier. So this is my valuation import configuration. And if we look at the field mapping tab, I'll show you how I've set this up. So for these first two rows here, this is the ID and value that were in my spreadsheet, and I've mapped them to the ID and valuation fields. These other ones I've set up as static text. And what that means is that I can enter the data that I want to be imported into this element text field in quote marks, and it will import that information to all of my records, and it's all the same information. So I've used the system ID for each of the terms, and that ensures that my import is going to run really smoothly. For example, for the valuation type, I have the system ID INT, which is internal. So that's the valuation type. For valuation method, I've got AV, which is the system ID for actual value. Here, I haven't used the system ID. I've just entered the actual data because it's a date. Then I've got the valuation reason INV, which is the system ID for inventory. And lastly, I've got the valuation person, the system ID number 1, which is Bill Vernon. Now, because these fields are in a row, in a table, so in the object valuation window, we had that valuation table with all these field names running along the top. That means that I need to enter a number for each of those fields in the table group, and they all have to be the same number. Doesn't matter what number it is, they all just need to be the same number. And that's going to tell Vernon to align this information in a row in a table. So that's all done, my configuration. So now I can run the import. I'll go to Tools, XML Import. In the import configuration field, I'll enter the name of my import configuration, and now I can just click import. Going through those records and updating them. So we can see that that information was applied to all of those records. Let's have a look. So if we open the valuation window for each of those records, we can see that information that's been imported. So the only data that I imported from my spreadsheet was the value, and the rest of it was in the configuration, and it's been applied to each of these records with that latest valuation going at the top. Okay, so that's how you can bulk update your records with valuation data. The last thing that I wanted to show you is how valuations and activities work together. So if you have the activities module, let's take a look at that. I'm going to look at a particular activity file, an outward loan. And we can see that we have 11 objects linked. So that's these vases down here. What I can do is click on this Objects and Activities button, and I can click Refresh Value. And it's going to give me the total value of all of the objects that are linked to this particular activity. So that works across all of the activities files. And the next thing I'll show you is how we configure which type of value to show there. So if I go into Tools, System Maintenance, Activities Configuration, we have this Object Values tab. So for each of the activities files, I can specify whether I want the current insurance value, the current internal value, or the current value, regardless of the type, to be shown in activities. And if that value isn't available, what's my second priority? So what's the other value that I want to show if my first priority isn't available? So that's been set up across all of those activity files, and you can select the options in there. Have a great day, and I'll hopefully see you at the next webinar.